The story of the first genocide of the 20th century begins in the vast, arid landscapes of what is now Namibia. At the turn of the century, this territory was known as German Southwest Africa, a key part of Germany's burgeoning colonial empire. Since 1884, German settlers had been arriving, claiming the best land and water sources for themselves. This relentless encroachment pushed the indigenous Herero and Namaqua peoples to the margins. Their traditional pastoral lifestyles, which depended on free movement across the land for their cattle, were systematically dismantled. The colonial administration imposed harsh laws, debt bondage, and brutal punishments, creating an atmosphere of deep resentment and desperation. The Herero and Nama saw their world being stolen from them piece by piece, their dignity eroded daily. This simmering tension was destined to boil over into open conflict. The resistance was led by charismatic and determined figures who refused to accept the destruction of their societies. For the Herero people, that leader was Chief Samuel Maharero. He had initially tried to cooperate with the Germans, but the endless land seizures and the mistreatment of his people forced his hand. In the south, the Namaqua people were led by the revered Hendrik Witbooi, a seasoned guerrilla strategist who had long been wary of German intentions. These men were not simply reacting to isolated incidents. They were leading a fight for their very survival against a colonial power that viewed them as obstacles to progress and racial purity. Their resistance was a desperate final stand to reclaim their land and their future. The rebellion ignited in January 1904. Under Samuel Maharero's command, Herero warriors rose up, targeting German farms and military outposts while initially sparing women, children, and missionaries. It was a calculated move, an attempt to drive out the colonial oppressors without descending into indiscriminate slaughter. The German settlers were caught by surprise, and the initial phase of the uprising was a success for the Herero. Later that year, Hendrik Witbooi and the Nama joined the fight, launching their own coordinated attacks in the south. They hoped their combined strength could expel the colonizing force. However, Berlin's response would be disproportionate and merciless, transforming a colonial war into a calculated campaign of annihilation that would forever stain the history of the German Empire. The German Kaiser, Wilhelm II, was unwilling to tolerate any challenge to his imperial authority. He dispatched an expeditionary force to crush the rebellion, appointing a man known for his extreme brutality to lead it, Lieutenant General Lothar von Trotha. Von Trotha arrived in German Southwest Africa with a clear and chilling mandate to suppress the uprising by any means necessary. He viewed the Herero and Nama not as enemy combatants in a war but as racial inferiors who needed to be utterly destroyed. His arrival marked a terrifying turning point. The conflict was no longer about re-establishing control, it was about erasing entire peoples from the land they had called home for centuries, setting the stage for a genocide of unprecedented scale and cruelty. The war reached its horrifying climax in August 1904 at the Battle of Waterberg. General von Trotha's forces encircled the Herero warriors along with their families, tens of thousands of men, women and children. The Germans deployed superior firepower, including machine guns and cannons, to break the Herero lines. While many warriors fought bravely, they were ultimately overwhelmed. But defeat in battle was not the end of their suffering. It was only the beginning. Von Trotha deliberately left one escape route open for the survivors, a path that led directly eastward into the vast and waterless expanse of the Omaheke Desert. This was not an act of mercy. It was a strategic part of his plan for their complete and total destruction. On October 2nd, 1904, General von Trotha issued his infamous Vernichtungsbefehl, or extermination order. The proclamation was read out to his troops and made public, leaving no doubt about his genocidal intent. It declared within the German borders every Herero with or without a gun, with or without cattle, will be shot. I will no longer accept women and children. I will drive them back to their people, or I will have them fired upon. This order institutionalized mass murder. It was a clear declaration that the Herero people as a group were sentenced to death. German patrols were ordered to systematically hunt down anyone who had escaped, turning the entire territory into a killing field where no Herero was safe. The Omaheke Desert became a vast open-air death camp. As thousands of Herero refugees staggered into the arid wilderness, German soldiers followed, poisoning the few existing water holes and guarding the wells to ensure no one could drink. The suffering was unimaginable. People died slowly and agonizingly from thirst, starvation, and heat exhaustion. Entire families perished together under the relentless sun, their bones left to bleach on the desert sand. This was a new kind of warfare, one that weaponized the landscape itself to achieve a demographic goal. The systematic denial of water was a deliberate and calculated method of killing on a mass scale, a tactic designed to ensure that the desert would finish the work the German guns had started. For those who somehow survived the horrors of the desert, a different fate awaited them: concentration camps. The Germans established camps at locations like Shark Island, Windhoek, and Swakopmund. Here, captured Herero and Namaqua survivors, including the few who surrendered, were imprisoned. Conditions in these camps were inhumane. Inmates were forced into slave labor for the German military and settlers, often worked to death. They were given starvation rations and provided with almost no medical care. Disease, malnutrition, and brutal abuse were rampant. These camps were not merely prisons, they were factories of death, designed to complete the genocide that began with von Trotha's extermination order. By 1908, up to 80% of the Herero population and 50% of the Namaqua population had been wiped out. For over a century, the story of this genocide remained largely buried, a footnote in the annals of colonial history. Germany, consumed by the guilt of the Holocaust, was slow to confront its earlier colonial crimes. It was only through the persistent pressure of Herero and Namaqua activists, historians, and Namibian politicians that the issue was forced onto the international stage. After years of denial and evasion, the German government finally began to shift its position. In 2015, formal negotiations began between the German and Namibian governments to address this dark chapter of their shared past. The process was long and fraught with political complexities, a difficult dialogue between the descendants of the perpetrators and the victims. In May 2021, a significant breakthrough was announced. Germany's then Foreign Minister Heiko Maas officially declared that Germany would recognize the atrocities committed against the Herero and Namaqua as a genocide from today's perspective. This was a landmark moment, a formal acknowledgement of a historical truth that had been denied for far too long. Alongside the apology, Germany pledged a financial package of 1.1 billion euros to be paid over 30 years. This money was designated as development aid for projects in land reform, rural infrastructure and energy, intended to benefit the communities descended from the genocide survivors. For Germany, this was a gesture of reconciliation, an attempt to heal the wounds of the past. However, the agreement was immediately engulfed in controversy and rejected by key representative groups of the victims. A major point of contention was their exclusion from the negotiation process. The Herero Traditional Authority and the Namaqua Traditional Leaders Association argued that the talks were conducted between two states, violating their rights as indigenous peoples to be directly involved in matters that concern them. They felt that their own government, in partnership with Germany, had decided their fate without their consent. The deal was seen by many not as a sincere act of atonement, but as a political maneuver designed to close the book on the issue without accepting true legal responsibility for the crimes committed. The terminology used in the agreement became another source of profound disagreement. Descendant groups vehemently reject the term development aid, insisting on reparations. The distinction is crucial. Aid is a form of assistance, a gift from one government to another, which avoids any admission of legal wrongdoing. Reparations, on the other hand, would imply a legal and moral debt, owed directly to the descendants of the victims for the immense suffering and material losses they endured. By carefully avoiding the word reparations, Germany sidestepped legal liability and the precedent it might set. For many Herero and Namaqua, this linguistic choice felt like a final insult, robbing them of the full justice they believe they are owed. The fight for what the Herero and Namaqua consider true justice is far from over. Despite the joint declaration between the two governments, descendant groups continue their struggle on multiple fronts. They have organized protests in both Namibia and Germany, making their voices heard on the global stage and refusing to let their story be co-opted by state-level politics. Their leaders have been clear. A deal made without them is not a deal for them. This resistance is rooted in a deep-seated belief that reconciliation cannot be imposed from above. It must be built on a foundation of mutual respect and direct dialogue with the communities that carry the intergenerational trauma of the genocide. These communities have also turned to the legal system to challenge the agreement. In early 2023, the Herero and Namaqua authorities filed a lawsuit in Namibia's own High Court. They argued that the joint declaration is unconstitutional and that the Namibian government failed in its duty to properly consult them. This legal challenge represents a significant hurdle for the implementation of the deal and underscores the profound divisions within Namibia over how to address the colonial past. The fight in the courtroom is a fight for recognition, not just of the historical crime, but of their right as distinct peoples to determine their own path toward healing and justice. The outcome of these legal battles will be pivotal for their future. Further complicating matters are the political uncertainties in Germany. The agreement still requires ratification by the German parliament, the Bundestag. With Germany facing new elections in early 2025 after a government coalition collapsed, the future of the declaration is not guaranteed. Meanwhile, a formal apology from the German president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, is being prepared. But even this gesture is fraught with tension, as it is being reviewed by the Namibian government before it is finalized. This continued political maneuvering highlights the fragility of the current arrangement and the persistent gap between a state-led diplomatic process and the grassroots demand for restorative justice that truly acknowledges the harm done. Remembering the Herero and Namaqua genocide is essential, not just for Namibians and Germans, but for the entire world. It serves as a stark reminder of the brutal realities of European colonialism and the racist ideologies that underpinned it. This story shows how campaigns of extermination were tested in Africa long before they were deployed in Europe. It also demonstrates the incredible resilience of people who have fought for over a century to have their history acknowledged and their dignity restored. Learning about this forgotten genocide compels us to confront uncomfortable truths about the past, and to understand that the quest for justice, however long and difficult, is a fundamental part of our shared humanity. The struggle of the Herero and Namaqua is a struggle for us all, for us.